Okay, so we've heard the ecological challenge, the planetary challenge, and I'm going to look at the human response, which is the human rights-based approach to responding to the challenge of transformation. And I'm using this menu for change idea as a menu for change for the planet, but also a menu for change for my discipline, which is human rights. How does this work?
Maybe the right, I guess.
Oh, yeah, the right, yeah. Right, okay. So the overview of what I want to cover in the next 20 minutes is a menu for change for ourselves, but also a menu for change for human rights, to bring together the broken parts of human rights. For those of us who work in that area of human rights, this is the legacy. Just as humanity has inherited a broken system of production and consumption, human rights has inherited a broken world of rights, even though rights in their very nature are supposed to be indivisible. So that speaks to the theme that was raised this morning of our global interdependence, that the different rights cannot be broken up. They're also inalienable. They cannot be taken away from us as human beings. So I want to talk about that and how the political rights and the economic, social, and cultural rights need to be put together. And that is the menu for change for human rights. I want to talk about how human rights will bring together the solutions, the recipe for change, which is really about rebalancing economics and the economy as we understand it with social justice and ecological integrity. I'm going to focus on the food system because that is our theme today in the menu for change, and focus on the right to food, specifically the right to adequate nutrition and to a healthy environment. And this is the tool that human rights gives to all of humanity, is the normative commitment, a commitment in principle and in values, to do something which is also a legislative and justiciable commitment, so that we all are entitled to these rights, but we are also all responsible and obligated. We have duties to act as citizens and to hold our governments to account for action. And this food is the immediate action area for applied human rights, specifically developed in economic, social, and cultural rights. The right to food is the first immediate action area to take action in applying human rights, in making them real in life. So that's the menu for change, is to orientate human rights towards the food system and bring into our food system transformation human rights as an essential tool for mobilizing the change that we want to see. So with the objective of attaining ecological integrity as the most important precondition for human health, both in individual terms and in social terms. Okay, so there are three main challenges. The first is an economic challenge, which in the menu for change has been expressed as the combination of responsible production and responsible consumption. And it's really about putting back together the broken pieces. I often explain to my students that many of the problems we inherit are like the problems of Humpty Dumpty. Do you remember, do you know who Humpty Dumpty is? He's this poor character who was pushed off a wall and he broke into pieces. We didn't push Humpty Dumpty off the wall, but we have inherited the broken pieces. So our generational challenge, which is, as Alexander has pointed out, the right time to face up to this challenge is, although we didn't break it, we must put it back together again. So this challenge of putting it back together again is about challenge of reintegrating the elements of production and consumption and underpinning them with an idea about responsibility, that we are responsible for producing and we're responsible for consuming, and that responsible production and consumption are at the heart of the change that we want to see. So in terms of production, to produce food responsibly and to reduce waste, which in the food producing side, it has to do with agricultural methods, storage, post-harvest treatment, transportation, and so on. But also, up to a third of all food is wasted. When we are looking at challenges to global food production, as Alexander has presented, and challenges of population, it is extraordinarily irresponsible to waste 1/3 of all our food. So responsibility to reduce waste, responsibility to reduce carbon emissions and methane emissions, the climate-inducing gases, but also to reduce chemical pollutants, because climate change is not the only zone of safe operating space that we have to consider. We also have to consider nitrate and phosphate pollution and persistent organic chemical pollutants. And now we also have huge issues around glyphosates and how these affect very important non-human parts of our food system, pollinators. So the broad area, I think, of responsibility is about being responsible in producing and food, in reducing waste, but generally to orient our production in a different way to make it more environmentally responsible, and not just to stop doing bad things, but to start doing good things. And that is to make investments in our fundamental ecological planetary assets of soil, water, and nature quality. Now, where responsible consumption is concerned, I like this little book by Michael Pollan, who gives the most sensible advice on how to responsibly consume food. And it's a little book called Food Rules, published a couple of years ago. And the food rules are simple. The first rule is eat food. Now, this sounds ridiculous, but it's really important. Eat food that is actually food, not a food-like imitation substance produced in an industrial manufacturing plant. He says, eat food that is real food. Don't eat too much food, which also means don't waste food. And eat mostly plants. So eat food that is made by plants, not in industrial plants. Eat food that consists of natural plants in their natural state, and try to avoid processed food. So very simple messages. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Yeah? Reduce waste in your consumption of food. Eat locally, because this is the matching action responsibility of the consumer with respect to the producer in terms of reducing your emissions of carbon. Eat less meat. This will reduce methane as well as carbon. And try to eat sustainable fish. And last of all, we are human beings. We live in societies and cultures. And I'm talking about human rights here, even though you haven't heard a single thing about human rights in the last 5 minutes or 7 minutes. And that is to respect and enjoy food traditions so that your future generations can also enjoy them. Yeah, really important foundational ideas. So that's the economic challenge of making a big transition, which is about changing how we think about the economy and how we do it. Societally, we have a huge societal challenge, which is mainly coming from the disease burden and the epidemic, the global epidemic of malnutrition, bad nutrition, where some people are having too few calories and too few nutrients. Hundreds of millions of people, about 800 million people. And then there are over 1,000 million people who have too many calories and also usually too few nutrients. We have people in different stages of their life cycle who are hungry and malnourished because the diet is not suited to their stage in the life cycle. So for the first 100 years of life, 100 days of life, a child from when a child is conceived to when the child is about 2, this is the critical time for nutrition for a child. And we see that there is a large proportion of children in the world who are stunted. These are children who are too small for their age, and that is a sign of long-term chronic malnutrition. Not enough calories, not enough nutrients, not enough protein, while they're in the womb and after they're born. It's usually because the mothers are malnourished. We also have a lot of wasting. This is when children are too skinny, and this is usually because of a food shock, or the kind of crisis that Alexander's environmental data was pointing to. So a nutritional transformation is needed, and I'm suggesting here that a right-to-food approach is a key tool, because the right-to-food approach is a global norm that says that food and the right to food is about adequate nutrition. We are focused a lot on production of crops, production of foods, but we haven't paid enough attention to the nutritional content of food and its nutritional function. So we know that agriculture is at the key of the ecological challenge that we are facing today. Because agriculture is where the food production is at the center, but all these other things come around it. Yeah, I've got this little infographic on the left from the Norwegian UN mapping agency, Grit Arendal, and this is an illustration of the multifunctional nature of food production. It's not just about producing food, it also produces health, it produces the ecological situation, and as well as producing income and economic opportunities. But the other big systemic risk is this idea that Alexander introduced about safe operating space for humanity. And what we see is that climate change is one of the areas where we have exceeded the comfortable safe operating space, is the green target on the right. Yeah, this is based on infographics, data, and scientific evidence that has been put together by the Stockholm Resilience Institute. You can see that of all the different aspects of the safe space, climate change is now critical. We have gone into the red zone. But it's not the largest problem. Look how much bigger the red piece of the puzzle is in terms of biodiversity loss. So the Anthropocene is making this time of the planet, where human activity is the main contributor to the planet's story, is now hugely being impacted by what we're doing. And climate change is not just about extreme events, refugees, even diseases. These are extreme problems. But for the first time in 65 million years, more beings and cultures are dying than ever before, since 65 million years. 65 million years ago, human beings didn't exist, and an asteroid hit the planet, and most of the beings who lived on that planet, which were dinosaurs, became extinct. Ever since then, we have not, as a planet, with or without people, experienced that level of extinction. Today, we are facing the same magnitude. So that's why that's huge. But you'll see also there's another really big red triangle in the nitrogen cycle, and this is to do with fertilizer runoff and the chemicals that we use to produce food. Sorry, I've gone far too long. I've got about 5 minutes left. Is that right? Okay. So I want to I know I haven't even started talking about the human rights yet, but anyway, I want to bring the conversation back to the Sustainable Development Goals and ask this question. What is it? What is sustainable? Sustainable development of what? So If you want a very long answer, I have written something about that you can get on Google for free. But I want to address the 3 pillars of what sustainable development is about: economy, environment, and society, to relate what we mean by economic development back to social development and respecting the safe operating space environmentally. And I want to use the menu for change that has been proposed by the previous special rapporteur on the right to food, Olivier de Schutter. Professor de Schutter has really made a huge contribution to understanding what the impact of human rights is and the usefulness of human rights is in addressing our big challenge. Okay? So Olivier de Schutter talks about a new paradigm, which is a transformation to a new food system that first of all rebalances economy. It does not see the economy as operating for its own reasons, its own ends, but as a means for effecting the transformation to the world that we need to see. So a new food system that will be rebuilt to reverse the addiction of the current food system to low food prices. So the current system is oriented towards producing large amounts, overproducing large amounts of staple foods at subsidized prices, and this makes huge problems for the countries and food systems on which these surpluses are dumped. So we need to stop that and to reverse that, to reverse this monocultural food system that is geared towards overproduction. You might ask, why is it geared towards overproduction when people need food, when the societal challenge is this burden of malnutrition, hungry people, malnourished people? Of course you want to produce more food. But as Pascal said this morning, producing more food is not the problem. Yeah? So it's the addiction to this cheap food mentality, subsidized food, that has caused distortions in the economic system and that has created subsidies for fertilizers and pollution. It has subsidized dumping and destroying economic systems in the less developed countries. And it has emphasized production of a small number of crops which are not particularly nutritious. So we need to think in terms of what the crops are for, what the agriculture is for. And so it's not an agricultural system, it's a food system. So it's a big change in thinking where the new food system will actually help to deliver on people's right to food, not only by producing the food, but by providing a rights-based approach to their adequate nutrition. So it's not about amounts of food, it's about food that is adequate for human health at the different stages of life, given the different needs that different kinds of human beings have. Yeah, babies, children, lactating mothers, elderly people have different food requirements to strong farmers who are working in the fields. And part of the rights-based approach to adequate nutrition looks at how people access food, and that is through work. So that links to a decent work agenda, to how people who don't have work can get access to food. So that's about social security and social protection that is not based on charity, but that is based on rights. They are human rights to have social protection so that they can access adequate food. Yeah? And where ecology is concerned, a new food system that shifts towards agroecological production, that also rethinks the way we tax and subsidize agricultural activities and trade activities in a way that will discourage pollution, discourage the use of fossil fuel, discourage the diversion of food into biofuel, and therefore bring the circle, the 3 pillars of sustainable development that used to be kind of separate and traded off and in competition with each other. The economy fighting society, the economy fighting society and society fighting ecology. Yeah? So our right to food comes from the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, Article 25. And it's important to see where it is based, where it comes from. The origin of the right to food is in Article 25, which is on the right to a standard of living adequate for health and well-being. That is where our right to food comes from. It's about our health and our well-being. That's what our right to food is. Yeah? And you can see the different particular stages of life, motherhood and childhood, they are afforded special care and assistance because the universality of human rights is about bringing different groups of people up to an equal standard of enjoyment. So if your group is in a different position, then it deserves special attention in the human rights version of the world, view of the world. This is translated in the treaties on economic, social, cultural rights signed up by, I think, 164, 165 countries, and is translated into Article 11. So the Universal Declarations of Principles, the Convention on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights is about laws. So this is international law that says that we have the right, everyone has the right to an adequate standard of living, including adequate food. So it doesn't say including food, it says adequate food. So this concept of adequacy is key to understanding the heart of the human rights approach. And these rights, when I say these are legal rights, involve us in respecting, protecting, and fulfilling the right. So we have to respect the right, and we have to protect the right. We have to not violate the right directly, and also we have to refrain from actions that might violate the right in other jurisdictions. So you have to think about other people and the universality of the right. Yeah, so there are extraterritorial obligations. So that's the menu for change. I think I'll probably finish here. Is the human rights-based approach menu for change is toward a food system that makes sufficient, adequate, and culturally acceptable food available, to make food physically and economically accessible, to be focused around adequate nutrition, which may have to vary depending on gender, occupation, and life stage, and the food has to be produced and consumed sustainably. Actually, can I just steal 1 minute? Can I steal 1 minute? Okay, I'm going to steal 1 minute, because I think this whole forum is really about thinking differently, and that on one hand, there's a universal and simple message that whether you're rich, poor, or in the middle, we all universally have a right to nutrition, and we all have duties to respect that right, to protect that right, and to make that right into a reality, to fulfill that right. So although I've made this very complicated table, it all has just one message, yeah? But what makes this universal message different, is that we have to think about it in what my colleague Vanessa Andriotti calls a heads-up way. We need to unthink and to rethink the way that we approach, the way we think and the way we act, and the way we reflect critically. And just to end then with this little bit of critical reflection on how the way we thought about the food system has been hegemonic, and we need to change that. We need to change ethnocentric attitudes, where we think it's white people saving black people, for example, and all black people are hungry and all white people are privileged. That's just not true. Yeah? We need to deal with history and understand the historical injustice that exists in the world system. We need to become political, because human rights thinking and food system thinking has been depoliticized, and we need to repoliticize it. We have to stop saying, oh, we are here to save those people. We are not. We're here to save ourselves, and out of our own self-interest for our own future. This means that the solutions will not be uncomplicated, and they cannot be paternalistic. They have to be owned by us, for us, and have us as the authors. Sorry for stealing your time.